least I hope you're back. Hopefully y'all are coming back from an exciting session of networking, visiting our awesome sponsors, Percieve, Avnet, Edge Impulse, or chatting with your newfound friends in the machine learning at the edge space. We have one more panel for you, and it ties together everything else that we've talked about, which is building ROI at the outer edge. So how to make this financially viable for a business. And we've got some great people to talk about that. Before we do, though, I want to remind you just a little bit for anybody who is just joining us how this works. You will see on the left-hand side, the stage, networking, expo, all of those are places you can visit. Note that when you visit any place that is not the main stage, you're going to turn off everything happening on the main stage to go to the other places. We will leave those sessions open till the end of the event. So after all of this is done, you can go and check out our sponsors or meet some new people. And on the right-hand side, you have the chat. And you can answer our 2-poll questions, or you can talk with your fellow people and ask questions. And this is also where you'll put your questions when I call for questions at the end of the panel. My colleague Kevin will pick those up and he will send them to me. So if you have questions, just ask them. You can CC or ping Kevin if you would like. And now it is time to introduce our third and final sponsor of the morning/afternoon. This is Steve Teich, who is the CEO of Percieve. And he is going to come back on and tell us just a little bit about what Percieve is doing for machine learning at the edge. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Stacey. How are you doing?
Excellent. So good to hear from you. So tell us what you're about.
Great. So first of all, hi, everyone. I'm Steve Teich. I'm the CEO of Percieve. And I'd very much like to thank Stacey and the organizers for this great opportunity to tell you a little bit about us. The purpose of Percieve is to upgrade the whole idea of sensors into perceivers that understand their surroundings. You see, sensors provide you pixels or audio, but have no idea what they're looking at, what they're listening to, what they're sensing, and we're changing that. Our chip, Ergo, puts so much horsepower right next to the sensor that we can provide the level of analysis and comprehension you'd think you could get only in the cloud, from the data centers at Google or Amazon or Microsoft. We are unique in that we can maintain cloud-level accuracy and performance while running entirely at the edge inside the IoT device and without any external memory. At the same time, Ergo offers lower latency than waiting for the cloud to respond, lower power versus transmitting megabytes per frame of video at 30 frames a second to somebody's cloud, lower cost versus transmitting that data and paying rent to store it in somebody's cloud. And importantly, we provide higher privacy, versus the creepiness of having video and audio of your house go to somebody else's data center, and higher security because it's much harder to hack data when it's not flying around the web. Remarkably, this tiny Ergo chip can run today's most advanced neural networks for image processing while burning only 20 milliwatts, not watts like other edge devices, not hundreds of watts like a GPU, but 20 milliwatts, which means we can go into battery-powered devices too. We don't use any external memory while processing data at frame rate and while maintaining data center level accuracy. Okay, so now you're thinking to yourself, oh, come on, is that really possible? Well, actually, it is. We're doing some new stuff, and we have some new technologies. Want to learn more? Check us out at percieve.io, and thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate that. And my favorite part of any event that I host is when someone springs a chip on us. I love it. It's my favorite. So thank you for that. And now I see that our panelists for the next panel are popping up and they look happy to be here. So this is our panel on making money at the outer edge. I've got Rob Martins, who is an SVP and Chief Innovation and Design Officer at Allegiant. Hi, Rob.
Hello.
I've got Simon Crosby, who is the CTO at swim.ai. Hello.
Good morning.
And I've got Jason Shepard, who is VP of Ecosystems at Zedata, and possibly a musician. I don't know.
Nah, yeah. My office happens to be my studio, so it works out all right.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we're just going to get this started quickly by we're going to get this started by quickly having you guys talk to us about working at the edge and what kind of jobs that you're doing there. And then we'll move into the monetization. Then we'll move into talking about monetization. So, Rob, why don't we get started first with you? What is Allegiant doing at the edge?
Sure. So Allegiant is a security company. So without going into a gross amount of detail for that, we have a lot of devices like push bars or door locks or things like that at the literal edge of buildings. And so we have been adding a lot of compute power and capabilities to these things that you might normally think of as being kind of just brainless, dumb, mechanical devices. So there's a lot of opportunity that we see for both connected intelligent devices at the edge, but also I'd like to talk a little bit today about non-connected machine learning as well. So a big swath of opportunity, even in the most, what some people might think most mundane of devices.
That's true. I touch those push bars every day. Well, maybe not every day now. And I have never thought about what could be inside or jamming computing in there. So I can't wait. Simon, let's learn more about Swim.ai and what you guys are doing at the edge.
So Swim.ai is a software platform for delivering continuous intelligence from streaming data. And typical deployments span, I guess, in a hybrid sort of sense between edge and cloud. And we automatically load balance the application infrastructure to run the right bits in the right place. But fundamentally, we process and build models on the fly from huge amounts of streaming data. And then these models analyze, learn, and predict on the fly themselves and stream the results of those predictions to users, to other applications, and to real-time user interfaces.
So you're telling me you're doing basically training at the edge?
We're doing unsupervised learning in some circumstances, yes.
Okay. And then Jason, Zedata. And I feel like I should let you talk about the giant edge glossary that you have also worked so hard on.
Yeah, well, it's actually a really good way to describe kind of what we do is to talk about this glossary. And we had, the first panel did a great job talking about the edge. And of course, on the chat, we were just going through all these considerations. And there are a lot of trade-offs as you go through the continuum, whether you're starting the centralized data center and you're coming down through the telco edges, and then you're getting into the on-prem data center edges, and then you're getting into all the way to the constrained devices. Zedata, we're focused on orchestration of applications and kind of workloads, including AI at these edges, but also accommodating legacy applications. So think of the companies like VMware out there that do awesome stuff in the data center. We're targeting the IoT edge. So virtual machines, containers, security for these devices at what we call the IoT edge, which is part of this glossary effort that I mentioned in the chat. Linux Foundation Edge Project is putting out this glossary within the next week that goes into great detail on all these trade-offs, because too many of the edge taxonomies are biased to one market lens. And so when we say we're focused on orchestration of devices and applications at the IoT edge, that means I am not in a secure data center. So someone can touch that box, and I need to pay specific attention to like a zero trust security model, but I'm still capable of running containers or virtual machines. And that is driven by memory. So it's 256 megs of memory, give or take, up to a server cluster outside of a physical data center, on a wind turbine, on a factory floor. It's not a gateway only. It could be a server. It's that class. The paper goes into all the detail. I'll leave it at that. But obviously, we want to talk about making money here. But really important to think about these trade-offs.
Awesome. All right. And I'll ask you, if you can you put a link to that in the event chat, Jason?
If you look for online, I don't want to make it a
okay.
big Zedata. The paper publishes next Thursday. There'll be a press release from the Linux Foundation. And it's fine. We were going to do a preview, but definitely, if you find me online, there's a blog that we published on Edge AI today that gets into some preview of the paper and whatnot. But yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Oh my gosh, we have news. You heard it here first. Okay, so let's talk about that sweet, sweet paper. Simon, I'm going to go with you because you really got me thinking about the challenges of monetization at the edge. And Dan actually in the prior panel talked about this. He was like, oh my gosh, things cost too much there. But you've got a great story, and I'd love for you to start by talking to us about how you've been thinking about that.
Well, I think an important thing is to think about the edge, not so much in terms of the physical edge, but where we process data. So for me, the edge is not a place. It's the most convenient place to get my fingers on the bits. Okay, and there are a bunch of cost trade-offs there, obviously, but included in that is some notion of bandwidth, latency, cost of physical devices of edge at the physical edge, and the complexity of managing them. Now, in our largest deployment, we're dealing with around 20 petabytes per day of streaming data. And the devices here are mobile devices. So we don't know the physical network. So actually the data is arriving, in the cloud. Okay. And so the edge is not a well-defined place that you can put things at to learn. So you have to deal with data arriving from somewhere. If you know the network, great. If you happen to be on-prem, that's super. But if you don't, you just have to deal with it wherever you get the chance.
Okay. And what about selling it? You had talked to me about processing, I believe, on traffic lights and the challenges associated with those 20 petabytes of data and doing anything with it.
Yeah. So traffic.swim.ai is a good example of a little app that's running right now. So we're widely deployed in US cities where we get spat information from the traffic infrastructure, from effectively these modern city lights basically are scheduled by the arrival of traffic. And so there we're getting huge amounts of data per day. Las Vegas, for example, is about 60 terabytes per day of streaming data from a few thousand lights. And what we do is we learn on that on the fly, and these digital twins, I guess, intelligent digital twins of lights predict their own future a few minutes out, and then publish predictions via an API hosted in Azure. And that is then consumed by customers such as Uber and Google and Lyft and so on, who have an interest in routing their vehicles better through the city infrastructure. And so there is a very interesting thing going on here, which is that the value of the data is, zero. Nobody can store that amount of data anyway, and it's ephemeral in terms of its time value. But the value of the prediction is quite considerable, and that is a market which can be explored. The customer here is not the city, okay? The customer is Google or whoever, and the interest is in the analysis and prediction that is derived from the data on the fly.
So you're crunching a lot of data. You have to do it really quickly. The data is only valuable for the span of up until the prediction is made. And you sell that to people for pennies because they're constantly getting it.
The interesting thing about continuous intelligence of this applications of this sort is that you always have to have an answer, and it always has to be current. Okay. So and what's it worth? Well, I think the market is busy establishing the value of these things. Now, it's certainly not worth your while to store the data and think about it later. Okay, and I think the cloud architecture has let us down in many ways because REST and database type architectures are slow, expensive, and wasteful. Whereas something like NVIDIA, Jetson, or the devices that we've heard about today can be tremendously productive out closer to the physical edge if you can get your hands on the data.
Okay.
Right. That's the trick with the cloud right now. Sorry, Stacey. It's like it's hey, send all your data to me, and then you can pay money to keep it here, and then you can pay
right.
money again and send it anywhere you'd like.
Exactly.
process perishable data at the source, and then only centralize things that make sense. And it's not like the cloud's bad at all. I mean, cloud's very, very important, but it's about that continuum.
Got it. And Rob, how are you guys thinking about making money at the edge? This is, we're still connected here, so we'll get to your disconnect later.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think what Simon and Jason just spoke to is the future for our business. When you talk about the data, you don't want to have a database in a cloud that pushes static lists that are not real time. In a world that is dealing with viruses like COVID-19 or other things, you have a combination of things going on when you come to that entry point. So we may want to check temperature. We may want to check what happened in the last 15 minutes. Was there a change in your status? Should you be entering this facility? Should you not be entering this facility? So as Simon describes, this ephemeral data that is being used in traffic or things like this, don't confuse it. It's the same with people flow, with seamless access. The more information that we can process more efficiently, the better experience we can deliver not only to the end user, but also to the facility manager. So in our case, the way that we monetize or think about monetizing is we have a very unique geography. And when I say that, I literally mean we have a whole series of devices, products, and tools that behave around a door frame, the door itself, the hinges, the locks, these push bars that we're talking about. And those all have unique traits that make them valuable in terms of they may have power running to them. That may be line power, that may be PoE, that may be solar, that may be any number of things that feed simple battery. When you have that geography, it gives us the opportunity to partner, to deliver value from companies other than just necessarily ourselves. And so we see all kinds of opportunities where if we wanted to, we could certainly lease a portion of our geography. If we wanted to, we could provide a certain level of service level agreement associated with the type of processing that we do. Does it need to be real time? Or is this kind of, more of a database in a cloud type of experience worth it to you? So there's lots of variability, which gives us lots of options to come up with new and interesting services and products for our end users.
So that's really interesting because you're talking about we own the physical device. So we own a physical place on a door. So if it's a push bar, we might have power, which then gives you the ability to lease out that space or maybe offer kind of like AWS on the push bar. So like a computing service there. That's a really interesting idea. Are people taking you up on that? Is that something that's
Yes. So actually we have, as you know, but maybe not everybody knows, I'm also responsible for the venture fund for Allegiant. So I get lots of inquiries from interesting companies that are in this, very early stage where they're trying to figure out how can I monetize on the edge? And I need a partner in order to be able to go and do that. How can I prove my value without having to develop this massive infrastructure? So I would say Allegiant is just an example. There are plenty of other people out there that can do some of these things. But there is a huge appetite for figuring out how to get there. A simple example that most people could relate to is Best Buy. If you want a really simple example, Best Buy competes with Amazon, but Best Buy, you could argue, is also in some ways the showroom. And so they lease space to to companies to show their products and things like that. If I wanted to lease space, I could do that. The other thing I could do is say, hey, let's put for example, some of your firmware or some element of your product that's going to make it ultimately easier for my customer to launch access control or a full building management system. And what I will do, because my products are actually specified in the building 4 to 5 years before the building's ever even built, I can offer you an advantage, which is my product's actually going to be specified in with no substitutions from a construction standpoint, and I could give you a unique advantage. We are open platform and we believe in choice, so we would never force anything on anyone. But there are opportunities where we could offer a more level playing field for a new entity that might not be as established.
Okay.
So it seems to me, Stacey, that part of the challenge here is this need for agility in terms of applications delivered to the right place to process, maybe the edge, maybe the cloud. The data has an important role to play in terms of orchestration, but in general, this notion of agility of the model is crucial. You know, if you bake it in, you're done, right? It's a fixed function thing, and yeah, it'll get better over time, maybe for the next building, but the ability to deploy a new, better thing over time is really crucial. And I think both the data and what we're doing is really important there.
Okay, so this idea of the model having value. Before Jason explodes or moves over to an instrument, I want to give him a chance to give us some of his thoughts. But two interesting things. One, Simon talked about the city not being the customer, even though he's using the city's infrastructure. And Rob talks about partnerships. And since you're the VP of ecosystems, Jason, I feel like it's really important to talk about when you're thinking about monetizing the edge, how do you think about bringing in partners? I mean, is this something, if you're trying to create a monetization plan, can you do this alone? Should you? How should you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a village. You had a great blog on ecosystems a few months ago, and I mean, it's the way you make money today is not going to be the way you make money in the future. There's a lot of people on my gift list of sending the book Innovator's Dilemma. If I only do this, the way I've always done it better, then I'll succeed. But so you got to pivot. So yes, it takes a network of folks. When it comes to AI. Ultimately, even the AI tools are going to become infrastructure. The underlying frameworks, you're seeing that happen with TensorFlows of the world and all that. The winners in the end are the people that ride above that on consistent infrastructures. The data, of course, we're here to provide, for the IoT edge, outside a data center, but still be able to run this kind of abstraction so that you have that flexibility that Simon talks about, that need to be able to have the portability. Eventually, the AI tools become more of a part of that infrastructure. You need that infrastructure to be really open. I mean, I'll talk your ears off about open source, and of course, we know each other from back when I started EdgeX with the team, and that's been really growing. And then Project Eve within LF Edge is also it's a Zedita contributed project. I really believe in open, and again, I'll talk your ear off on it, but very, very important is to build an ecosystem on top of an open foundation. And the winners in the end are going to be the people that have the best algorithms, the best domain knowledge, the best services, the best apps that build hardware because it has to be different. Not, because there's certain things, of course, the closer you get to the edge, everything gets more complex, as we've been talking about. And this is what it's about. And then it's about the network effect, this kind of drag factor across different ecosystems. Imagine if the internet was owned by one company. But so far, in IoT at least, it's like 400, 500, 600 platforms, whatever the joke is right now, of everybody trying to lock everyone into their own proprietary base. But that's like basically saying, if you wrap that domain knowledge up in those platforms, you're basically saying, use 10 different platforms for 10 different use cases in your business. That's bad news. So that's why we believe, this notion of completely agnostic to cloud, application, hardware, whatever orchestration, whether you want to run it in VMs or containers or whatever, that's important. And then you build up your ecosystem around it. And the last thing, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say these are technical considerations. I know they're business considerations too.
They're business considerations because if you don't consider how you architect today, you're going to architect yourself in a corner.
Right. So, but when you're starting to do these conversations to build out that ecosystem, so let's assume we're all doing this right. We're doing the open infrastructure. You can trade data, you can trade models back and forth, and we can talk about which is more important to do. How do you then think about bringing in partners who can work on that platform to actually share in the value? And what are the how do you find those people? What are the conversations you need to be having with them?
Right. So the way we're breaking it down, and this is, I've done in past lives, running ecosystems and whatnot, is you want to focus on people that bring value, whether it's services or technology, that aren't wrapping everything together. They're practicing this notion of abstracting various different key elements. I want to work with service providers that know about respective industries. I mean, Rob, working very closely with our team with people that do AI. We're really very closely with people that are doing security plugins that are valuable to our own. Someone that really understands the OT context in terms of protocols, or data ingestion tools, whether they're open source like Ajax, that we've been working on, but or more of a proprietary solution. Either way, you want to bring a collection of piece parts built around this open model. And then you can choose, and if you architect it right, again, that's why I think the architecture matters even in a business sense. You choose the best choices, across that ecosystem, and then you create that network effect. And then the other thing, the other thing I would say is, and I know we'll get into trust as well, but to get to the one the notion that Rob was talking about, you have to have trust in the infrastructure. Today, people don't piggyback on top of other people's hardware, because they don't trust that their data is not going to get cross-pollinated. Could you install one piece of hardware and get all this data and share it to all kinds of people, like a multi-tenant edge? Sure, technically, but physically, what's interesting is in the cloud, I don't know that my workload is running next to whoever. It could be my mortal enemy right next to me. But at the edge, I can see it. I can put my hands on it. It's tangible. And all of a sudden, psychology kicks in. This is where trust really matters in terms of how you build out your technologies.
So I just want to throw in this one thing. We say at the edge. It's like I almost want to say to you guys, get back in your shell. There are a billion mobile devices out there. That's the edge, okay? And the data shows up in the cloud. So don't bleat on me about the edge being the industrial edge, because it's kind of ho-hum. It's low volume of data, and it's kind of boring, okay? So
I would disagree with that, but I agree that the phones are a major edge, but I would disagree with that. But
I mean, there's a billion ARM devices out there sending lots and lots of data. So architectures that we have, and I agree with you 100%, Jason, have to be open and, embrace the ability for innovators to create applications which process data at the right places. I'm just averse to defining a physical form factor for that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that, and that's where you have to have a logical and a physical separation. The physical form factor comes into play in just like hard trade-offs, but I know when to get back to the business side.
I'm gonna call you out on the getting crazy technical. Although I love a good argument. Let's move back to where the value is, and then I bet we're gonna segue into trust, which will be fun. Simon, you brought up this idea that the models are what people are willing to pay for. And you also
actually, I don't think people pay for models. People pay for insights, predictions, whatever, analysis, right? So they don't pay for raw data. And the fact that a traffic light tells me 10 times a second that it's still red is kind of ho-hum, right? What they care about is that for the next 2 minutes it's going to do this. Okay. So to the extent that the event streaming world that we care about a lot is right. It's talking about effectively devices continually informing us of their changes of state. That translated into useful insights is the process of delivering value. And it has to be done affordably and at the right place. Maybe the physical edge, maybe the cloud.
Okay. And so let's talk about then getting access to this data, because that's tough. And Rob, I think you probably, I don't know how you would feel about having, well, you're a little different. I'm not going to ask you there. But how do we start thinking about trust? Like if you have two rival occupancy trackers on your push bars, for example, and they both want to go in there, how do you choose? How do you just say, hey, look, guys, can we just feed you this data instead and y'all can build something great from that? Like, how do you build a business model around shared data, or do we really need to actually own and build our own data?
So I probably have a little bit higher level thought process around some of these things than Jason and Simon do. But that's also based on my responsibilities. I'm also the chief design officer for the company as well. So understanding fundamentally three things for us is key. is the device secure? Is the device scalable? And is the device simple? And so you can apply both digital and mechanical traits to any of those three things. And so in the specific question that you asked me, Stacey, is that something, for example, where we believe they're competitive situation and it needs to be, and there's two of them and it needs to be binary. You can choose one or you can choose the other. But then how do we ensure that we're also not locking the customer down from making a choice if they made a change later? A simple analogy would be, hey, I bought this, Schlage smart lock and, a couple of years ago, and it only worked with this kind of phone, and I don't have this kind of phone anymore. Do I have to change out my smart lock? So engineering in that level of flexibility into those thought processes, and in some cases, I think they're binary, but really echoing Jason more here, what we're trying to do is think about it from a purely, you have to accept the fact that you're working in an ecosystem and that your value is to work well with as many people as possible, so long as they check the secure, scalable, and simple boxes. You also have to have the ability to raise that drawbridge, not if, but when somebody has a security breach or does something that they shouldn't do, so that you're not cutting off the entire solution set, the platform that you're providing to people. You're dealing with a very specific challenge or problem. In our case, I would say it's still nascent enough where we haven't bumped into that specific challenge yet with certain types of AI. But I would tell you, Stacey, that we do have those situations today with people that provide access control. So just as simply as I can state it, we provide locks, hinges, push bars, all kinds of security and access equipment, but we provide that into an ecosystem where other companies like OpenPath, like Linnell, a variety of different people apply access control in very different ways to very different markets. And when Simon talks about the insights that are being driven and the value of those insights, those partners provide.
Rob, I feel like I could not hear you. I hope other people could.
It was good until the last couple seconds.
Yeah,
Okay.
it just faded in the last second.
So we may have to refresh you. Rob, you may have to leave the stage and come back. Andrew will give you instructions. The excitement of a virtual event. Okay.
Just, if I may, Stacey, there are organizational issues beyond the tech. So we do a bunch of traffic stuff in Dubai, for example. And there's somebody who owns all the taxis, somebody owns all the Ubers, somebody owns all the trucks, somebody owns all the ships and public transit. And they all are instrumented, and they're all streaming data, but these are different fiefdoms, but the insights cross them. And so there's an important need to be able to provide applications which span domains of control, even for humans, in such a way that the humans don't feel that their data is being lost or that they're vulnerable, whatever it happens to be. So
Yeah,
there are really important organizational issues.
Yeah,
Is that something that? Oh,
go ahead, Stacey.
maybe you'll have an answer. Is that like an AWS or a broad horizontal play for a startup or a company to go into? Is like, I am the trusted repository for data, and I will send you insights, and I will store your models.
All the cloud folks want to do that, and they're starting at the basic level, which is give us your data, it'll all be awesome, and they're not doing much more than that. But actually, for many organizations, they're so paranoid that all this data has to remain on-prem. So, you have all these little slices of an org, say, Dubai RTA, where everybody has their own piece of the puzzle, but the real insight requires you to resolve problems across everything. So here's a real example. When a truck with bad braking behavior comes within 100 yards of an inspector, so an inspector is pulled over. Okay, that requires I know a whole bunch of things all at once, and so it's hard.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the cloud. So just building on what the guys are saying. So the clouds obviously are trying to create massive data gravity with what they're doing, and all good stuff. But one of my rules of architecting, and I promise I'll get back to the business side, is decouple yourself from any given cloud the moment data is created. And that's what we're doing within LF Edge. That's what a lot of people are doing out in the community. Open source is a great way to drive standards these days. Some people are like, oh, open source, you're giving everything away. I don't know. Google made a couple dollars on Android, so it's cool. But when you talk about the business side, so one thing I'll say is, this panel is making money at the edge. I would say it's making money on helping people with digital, and the edge is a tool. And where you run compute across the whole spectrum just depends on all these different trade-offs that we've been talking about all morning. I've been saying for a while, a couple years ago, I coined this thing just to be snappy, the holy grail of digital. And the holy grail of digital, as I said, obviously it's about sharing or monetizing data, but the other stuff is resources, compute, storage, networking, energy, anything consumable. And the last one is services. Your domain knowledge, if there's intrinsic trust that what you are selling is real across a network, and you can use technology to help. And of course, part of it's business relationships. Technology doesn't save everything. To solve these problems, like Simon exactly nailed it on the head. I mean, this is a people problem as much as it is a technology. It's trust. That's my data. Oh no, that uncovers dirty laundry. I don't want you to see that. So it's tricky. And so, we worked with a provider. I've worked with a provider that was trying to put a gateway on an engine inside of a car, because they own the engine. They were the manufacturer of the engine. And if they put the gateway in the car, they didn't trust that the OEM of that car was going to scrape the data that they wanted that was proprietary around how their engine ran. You see this all the time. The way you get there is you collaborate on open infrastructure, and then you can pop in, what Rob's doing with at the door, and that can be a feed, all the stuff that Simon's doing. This is how you network across these interconnected ecosystems. Again, imagine if one company owned the internet. That's what, the three clouds own the internet. Not going to happen. So it's about that network effect.
So how do you build these systems? Are they going to be built like automotive and oil and gas and access control?
Yeah, there's a real quick. Sorry, there's a certain set of things that can be common, and then there's things that are necessarily different. And it's in our best interest to drive the common things to be common. Then you apply domain knowledge on top, and the domain knowledge ultimately wins on top of that necessarily consistent infrastructure. Sorry, Simon.
No, I think you're right. By the way, I just on the basis of my experience with Swim, a positive indication of the future is that when you're trying to build these models on the fly and going for simpler things, which are contextual, you can rely on much less sophisticated models. You don't need a whole bunch of pre-training. You don't need to collect all the data beforehand. You're not vulnerable to overfitting or underfitting errors in the same way. And so I'm very encouraged that we can make a huge amount of progress with relatively unsophisticated techniques that are of local observation. So let me make this really concrete. A digital twin of an intersection can predict confidently into the future based on its own data plus that of its neighbors. That's all it needs. Okay.
Here's a great example. Sorry, real quick. I know you want to. There's an emerging trend at the telco edge around 5G. So a lot of people, 5G, it's going to drive your car. No. Anything that's latency critical will always be done in the car. But coordinating things at an intersection. Hey, car, you're coming out at the intersection. You're coming at the intersection. Hey, user with your cell phone, watch out, pedestrian. Those types of interactions, it needs that open ecosystem, needs those standards, so to speak. But great example of what we'll see.
Yeah, and we don't need some huge TensorFlow model to do that.
Okay. And
keep it snappy, right? Yeah.
Right.
So, and let's take that further down, because I think one of the these kind of super hyper local machine learning, basically running a model hyper local, makes a lot of sense. And in some cases, I'll let you talk about this, Rob, is they may not even need to be connected. And this is really interesting from a privacy perspective. I know when I'm thinking about like running my own home, I'm like, ooh, how much could I take local? I don't need Amazon knowing everything about me. So Rob, what are you guys looking at Allegiant there?
Sure. So we have a lot of, and Stacey, you you're one of the proud owners of one of our experiments. We have a little innovation engine called Pin and Tumbler Studio where we experiment with these things, and we're really talking about what does machine learning look like on non-connected devices. In our business, we've had an older technology that we would refer to as network on card. In other words, whenever you approached a door lock or something with your smart card or with your phone, it would take whatever the latest information that it had and update that device based on permissions, et cetera, et cetera. So we looked at that and said, that still could be invasive. What if I truly want something that's smart, that I have control over and that I can upgrade to the degree that I feel comfortable? And we're seeing a lot of opportunity. First of all, it's inexpensive now, and it's going to get a lot less expensive as we see the trends in the power utilization, like Steve talked about before we got on here. There is a lot of big time opportunity there. The other thing to keep in mind is not every device requires it to do, everything. So, for example, we can add intelligence to some devices or additional cool features or functionalities, and heaven forbid that they look cool, without necessarily, for example, having to share the identity that, hey, this is Stacey that came in here, unless you, the owner, in fact, want that technology. So we're researching that pretty deeply. At this point, we're looking at that. This is where we do get some energy from the startup community because people see the opportunity. But when we talk about what we just did in terms of the modularity, how do you manage these things? You can take simple examples like identity is a huge element. We're going to need to pass that in a secure, in scalable way. And in the trust, identity is one element. There are many, many, many other elements that Jason and Simon are much wiser than I am about that need to be managed. But I think as we come into that design structure, that structure can really support non-connected elements as well. And I think there's great possibility there.
I think this is spot on. I think the device identity and the relationship between devices and humans is fundamental, because it's just an extension of me and my world, really.
Yeah, and I guess just to be clear, Rob. Now, of course, some of those devices could live in the physical world and never be connected. Once they're programmed, it's fixed function. You never have to update it. Now, of course, when a certain device has certain intelligence, then there's security challenges. But also, when they're not connected, you don't have the same security challenges. So it's give and take. But then, of course, the same thing applies where you have constrained devices. You deploy, a tiny ML model to that it's working in tandem with resources upstream. I threw in the chat earlier, like an easy example of tiny ML is when someone says, "Hey Alexa," or "Hey Google," or whatever. That algorithm is programmed into the device. So theoretically, that device is not talking to anything. It's not connected until that local model recognizes that wake word. That's an example of a function that you're going to see more and more everywhere. And then maybe that device, like to your point, is never connected. But of course, increasingly, it's more powerful if you have that interconnection across the continuum.
And to bring that back to the business model, because I want to talk about how that's a good example of using this sort of machine learning to sell a product, and maybe you sell it one time, as opposed to, I think, for selling a prediction or selling anything like that, you're going to have cloud connectivity. You're going to have a relationship with probably a set of buyers. I don't know if there's a lot of use cases where you're like, oh, I'm going to make a single prediction as an individual company and sell it to like one buyer. That doesn't feel viable. We're about to be done, so I want to give each of you a quick concluding statement. You don't have to answer any new questions unless you like, here's how I'm going to monetize the edge. So I'll start with, it has to be quick. So Simon, go.
First of all, monetization has to do with the cost of producing the prediction or the analysis. And I think current cloud architecture betrays us quite badly with REST and databases. So it's vastly expensive, and it can be much cheaper. We've seen plenty of evidence today that that is the case. So I'm very optimistic about that. Second, I think the rich context around things. So in a sense, think digital twins of things that can figure out their relationships to other things around them in context, geographic and others, can give us enormous benefits in terms of accuracy and improvements.
Rob?
I would just say, understand what your unique superpower is, or that unique element about you. And then to Jason's point and Simon's point, understand the tools that are available to you, and you will create a narrative specific to your business that you can create a strategy around and figure out how you would most like to monetize.
Got it. Jason, can you do it? And then give me a drum roll, please. No.
Go back then, whip up a beat. So yeah, exactly. I was going to say the exact same thing, Rob. It's I call it your go-to dance move, but find your value and exploit it. You know, too many people are trying to do everything, or there's a lot of undifferentiated heavy lifting of recreating the plumbing. Not valuable. The value is in all the things that we've been talking about. I think that you obviously want to start small and scale big, but the stuff that Dan talked about was great, because that's what we're trying to address at Zedita, is this notion: how do I scale it? Great, I did stuff in Party of One, but Google Chihuahua AI muffin, and you'll see the challenges of doing stuff in the real world with AI. Build or join an ecosystem, but either build one or join one, but either way, you're going to have challenges if you're not part of something bigger and taking advantage of that network effect. We monetize stuff as a service, of course, and you choose the stuff that you want to add on top. We're exploring business models around selling hardware and software together. We're exploring subscription models. And then I want to take with the ecosystem, even the domain knowledge, and put it into that subscription. There's people doing ensuring of outcomes. There's all kinds of different models that build on top of these models. That are all great areas to explore, but at the same time, you want to be doing it where you're not reinventing the non-valuable parts.
Got it. All right. Well, this concludes this panel. A round of applause. Thank you. And exactly. If you want to see Jason's special dance move or anything else's, please head over to the networking or the Expo Center to chat with other conference attendees or see it and visit our sponsors. All of this will be open. All the chat stuff will be open even up until about noon PT and 3 p.m. ET. So I guess stick around, talk to people, have fun. I'll stay in the chat answering your questions. And thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey.
Thanks for having us, Stacey.
All right.